Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created Phaser 3. Previously, we worked on adding functionality to our battle scene to allow us to skip our text and our monster animations. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be links in the video description to the source code up to this point, as well as the complete source code for this video. There'll also be a link to the previous videos if you'd like to catch up. So let's get started. Alright, and so now that we have our logic in for skipping our animations, what we're going to work on next is we're going to add support for custom fonts to our game. So we'll be using a font from Kenny's Fonts for our game. And so to do this, the first thing we want to do is we want to set up some resources that we'll need in our game. The first one is we're going to need our font asset that we'll be loading in. So we'll be using Kenny's Fonts here. So there will be a link to this in the description of this video. There will also be a link to the direct download from the assets release section here. So if you can go ahead and download that asset, what we'll want to do is in your source folder, you'll want to go to assets, and then under assets, we're going to go ahead and add a new folder, and we're going to call it fonts. And so we'll go ahead and do fonts. And then inside this folder here, we're going to add a new subfolder. We're going to call this Kenny's Fonts. And inside the folder, this is where we'll want to go ahead and place our font file. And we'll also have our license. So we'll go ahead and paste those inside here. All right, so then after we have our fonts, what we need to do is to use custom fonts, we need to go ahead and use a library called the webfontloader. And what this does is this library allows us to load custom fonts that are linked via the style, the @font face. And so the webfontloader is one of the popular common libraries for loading in custom fonts. And so we'll need to go ahead and add this library to our code. And so there are a few ways to go ahead and add this library to your project. For this video, so for our series, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and load the file directly from the CDN, similar to how we're doing the Phaser library. So to go ahead and do that, let's go ahead and jump over to our index.html page. And then what we're going to do is above the Phaser library, we're going to go ahead and load in the web font loader. So there'll be a link to this GitHub repo in the description of this video. So what we'll do is we'll want to go ahead and grab this script tag here. And let's go ahead and add that to our index.html page. And then while we're in here, let's go ahead and update the title. So instead of project template, we'll go ahead and call this Monster Tamer. All right, and then so what we want to do is if we can go ahead and go into our source code, let's go ahead and go to our lib folder. And what we're going to do is we're going to expose the web font loader as a variable in the lib folder, similar to what we did to Phaser. And then that way we don't have to reference the global variable for this library. So what we're going to do is we'll make a new file. We're going to call this webfontloader.js. And so inside this file, all we're going to do is we'll do export default, and we're going to do our window and then web font. So when you load it in the library, it's going to be exposed as web font. And then what we're going to do is we're also going to go ahead and grab the types for our library. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and make a new file, and we're going to do webfontloader.d.ts, and then in the description of the video, there's going to be a link to this URL here, and this has the types for the version of the library that we're currently using, which is going to be the 1.6.26. And so if we can go ahead and copy the code here, we're going to go ahead and paste it in our types file here. And then what this will do, this is going to tell our IDE that we're exposing web font on our global window object. And then what we'll do is when we want to reference our web font loader, we're going to load it from our lib folder here. So we're just going to follow the same pattern that we already have in place for our third-party libraries. And for example, what we're doing with Phaser. All right, so now that we've set up our project to go ahead and have our new assets and to have our new third-party library, what we're going to do is we're going to come back to the GitHub repo for the web font loader, and we're just going to review what the library does and how we can actually use it. So for the web font loader library, what it does is after you load the library, you can use the web font loader to then go ahead and specify what custom fonts you want to load. And so out of the box, the library has support for fonts that are hosted on like Google, fonts.com, Adobe Edge web fonts. And so what you can do in those cases, you can just specify the font family name from one of those popular sources, and it will go ahead and download and load those font families for you so you can use them in your web application. But for our case, we can go ahead and specify our own custom URL, and that's going to allow us to load our own custom web font files. And so to do that, all we need to do is do webfont.load and then specify the type of files that we want to load. In addition to that, the other piece we need to do is we need to go ahead and add the @fontface style tag to our index.html page, and we'll go ahead and specify the font family inside that tag. And then besides that, the library itself also allows you to provide your own custom configuration. And then that way you can have callbacks for when certain things happen. So for example, when the library is loading your assets, you can get notified of that. Once they're fully active and they're rendered on the web page, you'll be notified when it's done. You can get inactive, so if there was an issue tied to loading those assets, we can be notified of that as well. And so the library is really easy to work with. It gives us a lot of functionality out of the box. So to see an example of what we want to do for custom fonts, we're going to come to the custom section here. And so for our config, what we'll do is we're going to specify a property custom, and then we need to provide the families that we want to load. And so this is going to be our Kenny font family names here. And then we need to go ahead and specify where our styles are. So if you have an external CSS page, this is where you'd reference that. If you don't, if you just have it on the page itself, you don't have to do a URL. So basically for our CSS, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and specify our font family name and then the source of where our font is coming from. All right, so now we reviewed the library. What we're going to do is let's jump over to our code, and we're going to come back to our index.html page. And what we'll do is at the bottom of our style tag, we're going to go ahead and add the @fontface. And so what we'll do is we'll do @fontface, and then for our font family name, this will be the font family name that we want to call the font that we load. And so we're going to call this Kenny Future Narrow. And then we need to go ahead and specify your URL. And so this will be where we placed our asset at. So this is going to be under our assets folder, under fonts, Kenny's fonts. And now this will be our Kenny Future Narrow.ttf. And then we're just going to go ahead and specify the format of how our fonts are stored. And we're just going to do true type. All right, so now that we have our @fontface, all we need to do is we need to go ahead and now provide our web font configuration. And so a good spot to do this will be in our preloader where we're loading in all of our other assets. So what we're going to do is we can go ahead and come into our scenes folder. Let's go ahead and open up our preload scene. And then what we'll do is in our preload method, what we're going to go ahead and do is at the bottom of the file, let's go ahead and load in our web font loader. And so to do that, we'll come to the top of our file and we'll go ahead and do import star as web font loader from our // and then our webfontloader.js. And then what we should be able to do is we come down to our bottom of our preload method. We'll do webfontloader, and we will go ahead and do default to reference the default property, and we'll go ahead and call the load method. And so now this is where we'll specify our configuration. And so for our configuration, what we'll want to do is we'll do the custom property. So we'll do custom, and this will be an object. And so this is where we can specify our font families. So we will do families, and now this is going to be the array of font families that we want to reference. And so this is going to be our Kenny's Future Narrow. So basically our string we specified here. And so we'll go ahead and do that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add another property called active. And what this property does is it allows us to provide a callback that'll be invoked once our font family is loaded and it's available to render on the web page. And we're just going to do a console log, and we'll say font ready, and we'll go ahead and save. And then so what we're going to go ahead and do is let's jump over to our browser. We'll go ahead and go into our game, and let's open our developer console. And I'm just going to go ahead and rearrange this to be on the bottom, and we'll go ahead and save. And so now we will see when our scene loads, we're going to see in our preload scene that we call the preload method, we call the create method, and then our font is ready. And so we can see that our library is working, and what we should be able to do is we should be able to use that custom font in our text game objects. However, what we want to do is we want to make sure that our fonts are ready before we actually go to our create method, because that's when we transition to our next scene. So we'll come back to that in a second, but just to make sure our custom fonts are working, what we'll do is we're going to jump over to our battle scene, and we'll go ahead and we'll add in some of our fonts. So what we'll do is we'll close some of our files. Let's go into our menu, so our battle menu, and what we'll do is we'll go into our config. And so to get started for our text style, we're going to go ahead and add in our font family here. And so to go ahead and do that, what we're going to do is we're going to do font, and we'll do family, and we'll go ahead and specify that same string. And now that we're starting to reference this string in multiple locations, what it makes sense to do is to actually specify this in a shared variable that we can use throughout our code base. And so to do that, what we'll do is we'll come into our assets folder, and what we'll do is we're going to add a new file, and we're going to do font keys.js, and we'll go ahead and expose a new const. So we'll do export const, and we'll do Kenny future narrow font name, and we'll set it equal to our string. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and reference this variable in both these locations, and then that way we don't have to worry about misspelling if we ever want to change that name. Just do it in one spot. So we'll go ahead and specify that here, and we'll go ahead and make sure we import that. All right, we'll go ahead and save. And so now we'll see right away when our scene reloads, we now have our new font for our battle menu here. And so it's being applied automatically because we loaded in that font. So we've confirmed that everything's working, and now we just need to address the issue with the timing of when it loads our resource. All right, so to go ahead and address that issue, what we'll do is we're going to come to our preload scene, and instead of loading our default font here, what we're going to go ahead and do is we'll do this in the create method. And what we'll do is, for the time being, when we call our active callback here, we will go ahead and then start our scene, and then that way we know our font family is loaded and ready to go. And then what we'll do later is we're going to work on refactoring this into a different method for loading in our data, but this will work for the time being. And so now that we've resolved the issue of when we go ahead and load our resources before we transition to our next scene, what we just need to do is update the rest of our text game objects in our game to use our new custom font. And so to do that, let's go ahead and jump over to our battle monster, and we'll go ahead and start there. So if we go into our battle monster class, what we have is we have a few places where we add text to our game. So we're just going to do .text, and we will search for that. And then what we can do is in our configuration here, we'll do our font family, and we will go ahead and specify our Kenny future narrow font name. And then what we're going to do is let's copy this, and then we can just find our other configurations options, and we'll go ahead and just paste that in. All right, so we've updated our battle monster class. So let's jump over to our player battle monster, and we'll update our text game object there as well. And let's go ahead and fix our import. All right, and that should be all the references to our text game object. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and we're going to test our changes. So we come to our game scene, let's go ahead and refresh. And now what we should see is our monster names and our battle menu text should all be using our new custom font. So go ahead and hit the space key. We'll see we get our monster, go into our menu, and all of our text for our options and for our attack options are updated. All right, so now that we've added in our custom font to our game and we verified it's working in our battle scene, That actually brings this video to an end. In our next video, what we're going to do is we're going to work on refactoring the logic we added to our preload scene for our web font loader. And instead, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at using Phaser's loader plugin and how we can use that plugin to load in custom files. And then that way, we're more tied into the Phaser ecosystem. So as a reminder, there's a link in the description of the video to the complete source code for this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hitting the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please see some of the links on your screen now.